The seal on the warrant was perfect, and that was the first thing wrong with it. I had served 11 years as a clerk of the lower chancery in the old court at Vellenmore, and in 11 years I had learned that nothing made by men is ever perfect. The Lord Chancellor's wax pressed crooked when his hand was tired. The under-seals carried a chip on the lion's left paw, worn into the brass 40 winters before I was born. Real documents were full of small, honest faults, the way a true thing always is. But the warrant that came up the stair to me that gray morning bore a seal so clean, so square, so flawless, that my thumb stopped on it the way a man's foot stops at the edge of a dark stair he cannot see the bottom of. I told myself I was tired. I had been at the writing desk since before the bells, and a clerk who lets his fancies into his work is no clerk at all. So I read the warrant through, as was my office, and I copied its particulars into the great register where every order of the court must be entered before it can be carried out. And as I copied, the wrongness in it spread from the seal to the words, the way damp spreads through a wall. The warrant ordered the death of a man named Garrick Ostry, a wheelwright of the river quarter, for the murder of a grain factor named Halden Crew. It was signed in the name of the Crown, sealed under the High Justiciar's authority, dated 3 days past, and it commanded that Ostry be taken from the holding cells beneath the court and hanged at the river gallows on the morning of the Feast of the Thaw, which was the morning after next. I knew the case. Every clerk in Vellenmore knew the case, because Halden Crew had been a rich man, and rich men's deaths fill a courthouse with noise. Crew had been found in his counting room with his strongbox open and his throat let, and the city had wanted a neck for it before his blood was cold. They had taken the wheelwright Ostry because Ostry owed Crew money, and because a witness had sworn he saw Ostry's cart outside the counting house the night it was done. But the trial had not yet happened. That was the thing that stopped my pen. I sat with the nib drying in my hand, and I went back through the warrant a second time, and a third, and there was no mistaking it. A man cannot be sentenced to die for a crime he has not been tried for. The court had not sat. No jury had heard a word. The case of Garrick Ostry was set down in our own calendar. I had written the entry myself in my own hand, not a fortnight before, to be heard before the High Justiciar on the 3rd day after the thaw. The warrant in front of me ordered him dead the morning before that. It was the wrong shape entirely. Not a forged man's name, not a counterfeit coin a clerk might catch by its ring. It was a true thing made too soon, like a death notice written before the dying, and that is a far colder thing to hold in your hand at dawn. I should tell you what I was and what I was not. I was not a brave man. I want that understood from the start, because what follows is not my story, though it passed through my hands. I was a small, careful, frightened man who had spent his life keeping books for greater men and asking no questions, because a clerk who asks questions does not stay a clerk long, and I had a mother to keep and no other trade. When I tell you my heart was knocking against my ribs that morning, I do not want you to think it was courage. It was the plain animal fear of a man who has found something he was never meant to find and knows it. I did the cowardly, careful thing first. I went looking for a reason it was right. I climbed to the upper office to find the registrar of warrants, a dry old man named Pibb who had outlasted 3 chancellors and feared nothing but a blot. I laid the warrant before him, and I said, in a voice I tried to keep level, that the date troubled me, that the trial was not yet held. Pibb looked at the seal, and his whole face changed, not to alarm, but to a smooth, shuttered calm I had never seen on him, the calm a man puts on when he has decided not to see a thing. "The seal is in order," he said. "The hand is the High Justiciar's clerk. You will enter it and pass it down to the holding office for execution. That is your office. The rest is not. But the trial is a matter for the court, not the register." He set the warrant back in my hands as though it were a hot coal he was glad to be rid of. "Enter it, Master Wend. Pass it down, and do not climb my stair again about a thing that is sealed." So I knew. I knew then that whatever was wrong with that warrant, Pibb knew it too, and had chosen the shuttered calm over the danger of seeing. And I understood, standing on that cold landing with the paper shaking in my hand, that I was alone with it. Whatever I did or failed to do, the wheelwright ostry would hang in 2 mornings for a trial that would never happen, and the register would show my hand entering the order and my name beneath it, world without end. I went back down to my desk. The register lay open where I had left it, and I did the thing I have never told anyone until now. I did not enter it. I left the line blank. I set the warrant in the drawer where I kept blank vellum, under the sheets, where no man would look. And I told myself it was only for an hour, only until I could think, only until I could find one honest man in all of Vellenmore who would look at the date and see what I saw. I did not yet know that there was such a man, and that he had been standing not 30 feet from me for the whole of that morning, saying nothing, seeing everything, as it was his whole life's discipline to do. He stood at the door of the cell stair. He was one of the Crown's own, a sentry of the old guard, in the gray and silver of the household, with the long ceremonial halberd grounded at his side, and the bearskin shadow of his helm hiding the upper half of his face. The guard kept the courthouse the way the guard had kept it for 200 years, motionless at the doors, silent as the stone, a fixture so constant that the clerks and lawyers and turnkeys walked past them as they would walk past a pillar. I had passed this one 1,000 times. I did not know his name. I am not sure in 11 years I had ever truly looked at his face. But as I came down the stair with the dead warrant burning a hole in my drawer behind me, I felt his eyes on me. Not his face. He had not moved his face at all. Only his eyes, 2 pale points under the shadow of the helm, following me across the hall the way a man's eyes follow the one thing in a room that has changed. And I understood, with a cold that had nothing to do with the morning, that he had seen me carry the warrant up to Pib, and he had seen me carry it back down again, unentered, into the dark of my own drawer. I went to my desk and bent over my work and did not look at him again. But a man cannot unfeel a watching, and all that long morning I felt his stillness at the door like a weight on the air. Lawyers came and went. The turnkeys clattered up and down the cell stair with their iron rings. A pie seller's boy was turned away at the great doors. And through all of it the sentry stood unmoving in his gray and silver, and I knew, the way you know a held breath in a quiet house, that he was waiting. At the noon bell the hall emptied for the meal, as it always did, and for a quarter hour the great cold room held only the 2 of us, a frightened clerk with a secret in his drawer, and a soldier of the Crown who had watched him hide it. I kept my eyes down. I heard, very softly, the butt of the halberd lift and set down once upon the stone, a small sound, deliberate, the sound a man makes when he means you to know he has chosen to speak. You did not enter it. His voice was low and even, pitched to carry no further than my desk. He had not turned his head. To any soul who walked in he was a statue at the door, eyes forward, speaking to no one. The warrant for the wheelwright, you carried it up, you carried it down. The register is open on your desk and the line is blank. You did not enter it. I will not pretend I was anything but afraid. To be marked by the guard was to be marked by the Crown itself, and I did not know yet whose man he was. It is not your office to read my register, I said, and my voice came out thin. No, he agreed. It is my office to keep this door. I have kept it for 19 years, and in 19 years I have learned the look of a man who has found a wrong thing and is afraid of it. You have it now. You had it on the stair. A pause. The cold light from the high windows lay across the silver of his collar. I have it too. I have had it for 3 days. That turned me in my chair before I could stop myself. 3 days, I said. The warrant is dated 3 days. The warrant is dated 3 days, he said. And 3 days ago I stood this same post through the night as I do one watch in 4. I am not supposed to hear what passes in the justiciar's rooms above. A guard hears nothing. That is the trade. But the chimney of the justiciar's writing closet runs down inside this wall, the smallest movement of his eyes toward the stone at his shoulder, And on a still cold night, a man at this door hears more than he is meant to. I heard 2 men make that warrant. I heard the wax warmed, and I heard the name they said in it, and it was not the name they spoke between themselves. The hall was very quiet. Somewhere far off a door closed. What name did they speak? I asked. They spoke of the wheelwright as a thing already settled. The wheelwright hangs, and it is done. His jaw was a hard line under the helm. But the murder they spoke of, when they thought no living ear could hear them, the thing that was done in Crewe's counting room, they laid it at another door. Their own. One of the 2 men in that room killed Halden Crewe, Master Wend. I am as sure of it as I am of this floor under my boots. And the warrant in your drawer is the lid they mean to put on it. A man hanged before he can be tried, so that no trial can ever ask the questions that would hang them. I sat with that the way a man sits with a wave he sees coming and cannot outrun. Then go to the High Justiciar, I said. Tell him what you heard. For the first time the sentry's stillness changed, not broken, only deepened, the way deep water is stiller than shallow. The High Justiciar, he said quietly, was one of the 2 men in the room. I think a braver man would have stood up. I sat. The High Justiciar was the highest law in Vellenmore short of the crown itself. There was no court above him in this city, no judge who could be brought to sit over him, no clerk who could enter a warrant against him and live a week. To say the justiciar was a murderer was to say the river ran uphill, and yet the sentry had said it as a man states the weather, and I believed him, because his fear was the same shape as mine, and a man does not catch your own fear by lying. Who was the second man? I asked. That I do not know. A heavier voice. A man who came and went by the upper stair, not the public door. They called each other no names, careful men both. But the second man owed Crewe a great deal by what they said, and Crewe had begun to ask for it loudly in front of others, the way a creditor does when he means to ruin you. That is motive enough for one murder, and a justiciar who will sell a hanging is friend enough for the other half of it. The halberd shifted a half-inch in his glove. I have turned it over for 3 days, Master Wend. I am a guard. My whole office is to stand still and let the law pass through these doors as it is given to me. If I leave my post, I am a deserter. If I lay a hand on a paper of the court, I am a thief. If I accuse the High Justiciar of murder on what I overheard through a chimney, I am a madman, and they will say so, and I will hang beside the wheelwright for slandering the crown. I have no standing. I have no proof. I have only what I heard, and a guard's word is the cheapest thing in any court. We are furniture. No one calls the furniture to testify. Then why, I said, have you told me? He was silent a moment. The bells for the end of the meal had not yet rung. The hall was still ours. Because you did the one thing I could not, he said. You held the warrant in your hand and you did not enter it. You left the line blank. A guard can only stand at the door. But a clerk is inside the law. A clerk's pen is the thing that makes a warrant real or leaves it a dead letter. As long as that warrant is not entered in your register, it cannot lawfully be passed to the holding office, and the wheelwright cannot lawfully be taken to the gallows. You have not saved him. But you have bought him time, and you did it without knowing why. I have watched men walk that hall for 19 years. I know the look of a man being asked to do a wrong and refusing it before he has even framed the word no. You had that look on the stair, so I have told you. Now there are 2 of us who know, and 2 is not 1. It is a strange thing to be told that the most cowardly act of your life, hiding a paper in a drawer, was in truth a stand. I did not feel like a man who had taken a stand. I felt like a man who had stepped off a roof and was only now noticing the ground. But he was right about one thing. The warrant could not move while the line stayed blank. The lid could not close while one small clerk refused to put the last nail in. It will not hold, I said. Pib knows I have it. By tomorrow he will ask why it is not entered. When I cannot answer, they will take it from me and enter it themselves, or have another clerk do it, and the line will be filled by some hand that does not care what's true. A blank line is not a wall. It is a held breath. Then we do not spend the breath waiting, the sentry said. We spend it finding the proof that turns one held breath into a thing no justiciar can hang us for saying. You have what I lack, you are inside the law, you may touch its papers without crime. I have what you lack, I keep the door no one notices, and a man no one notices sees everything. Between the two of us, Master Wend, there may be enough. The end of meal bell rang then, and the hall began to fill, and the sentry was a statue again, eyes forward, the conversation packed away as though it had never been. But as the first lawyers came clacking back across the stone, he said, very low, without moving his lips that I could see, his name is Stennet, the wheelwright. He has a daughter who brings him bread to the cell grate each evening at the change of the watch. She is the only one in this city who believes he is innocent. Tomorrow, when she comes, find a reason to be at the grate. Hear what she has to say. There is always a thread. The men who tie these knots are clever, but they are never as clever as they think, because they have never had to stand still for 19 years and watch how the world truly moves. Then a turnkey passed between us with his iron ring, and the sentry was gone behind the wall of his discipline, and I was a clerk again with ink on my fingers and a death in my drawer. But I had a thing I had not had that morning. I was not alone with it. And though I did not yet understand it, the man who had given me that, who had nothing, who could lose everything, who could not so much as raise his voice without forfeiting his life, had quietly decided to spend himself, entirely, on a wheelwright he had never met, because he had stood at a door 3 nights ago and heard the truth, and a man who hears the truth and does nothing is, to his mind, no guard at all. That night I did not sleep. I lay in my narrow room over my mother's hearth and listened to the river through the wall, and I counted the ways it could end with my neck in a noose, and there were a great many of them. But each time I came round again to the same place. A man I did not know was going to die for a thing he had not done, and I had the paper in my drawer, and the line was blank, and somewhere in the dark a daughter was lying awake believing in her father. I rose before the bells. I did not feel brave. I felt the way a man feels who has finally stopped lying to himself about what he is going to do. The next day was the eve of the thaw. The warrant said Stennet Garrick Ostry was the name on the paper, but his true name, the sentry had told me, was Garrick Stennet. The warrant had even got his name a little wrong, which I might have caught the first morning had I not been so frozen by the seal. The warrant said he would hang at dawn the day after. I had 1 day. I spent the morning doing my office with my head down and my ears open, and twice I felt Pib's eyes on me from the upper landing, and once a clerk I did not know, a smooth young man in good cloth, came to my desk and asked idly how the register stood, whether all the week's warrants were entered and passed down. I said they were. I do not know why I lied so smoothly. I had never been a liar. Fear, I think, is a great teacher of small crafts. At the change of the evening watch, I found my reason to be at the cell grate. A clerk may always invent a reason to carry a paper anywhere in his own court, and I carried one down the cell stair past the sentry. A different man that hour, I noted, not mine. Mine stood the day, and there, at the iron grate of the holding cell, was a girl of perhaps 15 with her father's hands and her mother's grief, passing a heel of bread through the bars to a gray-faced man who took it as though it were the last warm thing in the world. I did not announce myself as anyone. I made a show of reading my paper by the grate's poor lamp, and I listened, and after a while I spoke to the girl low, as one frightened person to another, and told her only that I was a man of the court who did not believe everything the court said, and asked her to tell me about the night the grain factor died. What she told me was this. Her father's cart had indeed stood outside Crew's counting house that night, but not because her father was there. Her father had lent the cart, 2 days running, to a man who had come to him with coin and a story about moving furniture, a heavy, quiet man her father had never seen before nor since. Garrick Stennet was a wheelwright. He mended carts and sometimes hired his own out and thought nothing of it. The witness who swore he saw Stennet's cart outside Crew's door had sworn true and meant a lie. It was Stennet's cart, but not Stennett driving it. And the heavy, quiet man had returned the cart before dawn with something washed out of its bed that had stained the boards a color her father could not scrub away, and had told Stennett, pleasantly, that if he ever spoke of the hire he would find his daughter had no father at all. And then, 4 days later, the watch had come for Stennett anyway, for a murder, and her father had understood that he had been chosen for it from the start, a wheelwright with a debt and a borrowed cart. The perfect coat to hang the crime upon. The boards, I said, my mouth had gone dry. The cart. Where is the cart now? In the yard behind our house, she said. The watch never took it. They had the witness. They did not need the cart. She looked at me with eyes far older than 15. The stain is still in the boards, sir. I could not scrub it out either. I climbed back up the cell stair with my legs not quite my own. A stain in the boards of a cart was not proof a justiciar could be made to fear. A clever man would say it was pitch, or beast's blood, or the wheelwright's own guilt. But it was a thread. It was the heavy, quiet man, the second voice in the room, made flesh and tied to a wheel and an axle in a yard by the river. And as I came up into the hall, my sentry was there at his door in the last gray light, eyes forward, a statue once more, and I understood that the thread had a second end, and that he had been holding it the whole time. I told him in the low quarter hour after the public doors were barred what the girl had said. He listened without a flicker. When I spoke of the heavy, quiet man who came and went by no one's notice, something settled in him, the way a key settles into a lock. I have seen him, he said. The murderer. The second voice, the heavy man. His eyes did not move from the dark hall. 3 nights ago I heard him through the wall but never saw his face. He came by the upper stair, which I do not keep. But I have stood this door 19 years, Master Wend, and a guard's whole craft is to mark who passes and never seem to. There is a man who has come to this court 4 times this month by the public door, asking after the Stennett case at the lower desks. A heavy man, quiet, well-dressed but not finely, the kind of man who pays others to be finely dressed for him. A factor, a man of debts and warehouses. The first time he came he asked, very pleasant, whether the wheelwright's trial was certain to proceed, and seemed put out to hear there would be a trial at all. He wanted it done without one. He is the man who owed Crewe a great deal, and he is the man the justiciar is hanging an innocent to cover. The halberd was very still. I do not know his name. But the lower desks will have it. Every man who asks after a case leaves it in the daybook signed. You are inside the law, Master Wend. You can read a daybook. I cannot. I went cold and then strangely steady. For the first time the thing had edges I could take hold of. A name in a daybook. A stain in a cart. A warrant dated before its trial. None of it alone was a wall. But together they were a shape, and the shape was the truth, and I had spent 11 years learning that the law, whatever men did with it, was in the end only the careful keeping of true shapes in ink. If they had made a false thing in ink, then a true thing in ink could undo it, if it reached a hand high enough and clean enough to act. There is no hand high enough, I said, hearing my own despair. The justiciar is the law in Vellenmore. Who do we carry it to? There is one court above the justiciar, the sentry said. The Crown's own bench, the assize that rides the circuit and sits over the high judges themselves, the court that judges the judges. It is the only law the justiciar cannot close. And by the grace of the calendar, Master Wend, the lord of the assize, is in this city. He came for the thaw. He lodges in the Crown's wing, not 300 paces from this door. I have stood guard at his lodging twice this week. He is an old hard man, and he hates 2 things above all others, a paper out of order, and a judge who forgets he is also under the law. For one moment, one only, I thought I saw the ghost of something fierce move under the helm. Bring me the warrant, the daybook name, and the truth of the cart, all in order, all in a clerk's clean hand, and I will get you to the lord of the assize before the dawn bell rings for the gallows. I cannot speak in that room. Furniture does not speak. But I can stand you at his door, and I can stand there with you, and if it costs me my post and my neck both, then it costs them, and I will pay it gladly, because I have stood at this door 19 years keeping a law I believed in, and I will not stand here one more dawn keeping a murder." It was the longest thing he ever said to me, and the only time I heard the man inside the stillness all the way through. But the breath we had been spending ran out that very hour. I had gone back to my desk to begin the fair copy. The brief, the true narrative, the warrant's false date set against the calendar's true one, the daybook name, the cart, all of it in the clean clerk's hand that the lord of the assize would respect where he would have thrown a guard's wild word into the fire. I had the register open and the warrant out of its drawer at last, on the desk before me, when I heard the upper landing door, and the smooth young clerk in good cloth came down the stair, and behind him came Pib, and behind Pib came a turnkey with a lantern, and I knew before any of them spoke that the blank line had been found. "Master Wend," said the smooth young clerk, pleasant as poison, "the registrar tells me you took a warrant for entry 2 mornings past, and it stands unentered still. The wheelwright hangs at dawn. The holding office cannot lawfully take him without the entry, so I have come for the warrant and the register both to set the matter right myself." He held out a soft hand. "You look unwell, Master Wend. Perhaps the work has been too much for you. Give it here and go home to your mother, and let it be no more of your concern." He knew about my mother. That is how I knew, past all doubt, whose man he was, for I had never spoken of her in that court in 11 years. They had looked into the small, frightened clerk, and they had found the one rope that could be put round his throat without a noose, and they were holding it out to me now, gently, in a smooth young hand, in the last hour before the dawn. I want to tell you that I stood and defied them. I did not. I'm a small man and I was very afraid, and my hand, when I think of it now, was already moving toward the warrant to give it over. A whole life of keeping my head down does not leave a man in one breath. The smooth clerk saw my hand move and smiled, because to him it was over, and to me, very nearly it was. What turned it was not my courage. It was a sound, the soft double knock of a halberd butt set twice upon the stone, out in the great hall, where the day watch had no cause to be at that hour. My sentry was not on duty. His watch had ended at the barring of the doors. He had no right to be in that hall in his gray and silver at the foot of the cell stair. And yet there he was, when the smooth clerk and Pib and the turnkey turned at the sound, standing in the lamplight at the mouth of the stair, halberd grounded, eyes forward, immovable, a soldier of the crown squarely between 3 men and the only door out of that room. He said nothing. He did not need to. The smooth clerk's smile thinned. A clerk and a registrar and a turnkey could bully a frightened bookkeeper in the dark. They could not lay a hand on a paper, while a sworn sentry of the household stood watching it, because the one thing in that whole rotten court that still meant exactly what it had always meant was the guard at the door. To shove past him, to seize the warrant by force in front of him, was to make him a witness no day book could erase. And these were careful men, men who killed by paper precisely because they feared the things that could not be unwritten. "You have no post here at this hour," Pib said to him, and his dry voice cracked on the last of it. "No," said the sentry. He did not move. "I have no post. I'm a private man standing in a public hall watching the law be kept." The smallest pause. "Master Wend, finish your fair copy. I find I have all the time in the world." I finished it. My hand shook so that the first lines were nearly ruined, and then it steadied, the way a man's hand steadies when at last there is nothing left to lose. I wrote the warrant's false date and the calendar's true one beneath it. I wrote the name from the lower desk's daybook, for the smooth clerk in his certainty had let slip enough that I knew now where to look, and I had looked that very afternoon. A factor named Orm Caddick, who had asked 4 times whether the trial would surely proceed, and signed each time in a heavy hand. I wrote the truth of the cart and the daughter and the borrowed wheels. I sealed it with my own small clerk's seal, the honest crooked one, and I rose with it in my hand, and the smooth clerk stepped to bar my way. The sentry's halberd came down level across the foot of the stair, not at the clerk, never touching him, only between us. A line of gray ash and steel laid across the floor like a drawn border. "He is a clerk of this court," the sentry said, "carrying a paper of this court to a judge of this court. That is the most lawful thing a man can do in this building. Stand aside, or be the man who laid hands on the law in front of a witness sworn to the crown." The smooth clerk stood aside. We went out together into the freezing dark, the clerk and the soldier, across the silent yards toward the crown's wing, and I will not pretend it was a triumphant march. It was two frightened men half running over icy stone with a paper, and behind us, I have no doubt, others were already running the other way to wake the justiciar, to send word to the gallows to make haste, to undo us before the ink was dry. The sentry brought me by ways I did not know, past doors where the household guard knew his face and let us by on his nod alone, for a guard trusts a guard, and that brotherhood in the end was the road we traveled. At the Lord of the Assizes lodging, the sentry stood me before the door and struck it himself with his gloved fist 3 times, like a man knocking on judgment. The old judge came to it in his nightgown with a candle, furious, and he stayed furious for exactly as long as it took him to read the warrant's date against the calendar. Then he went very quiet and very cold and very awake. He was, as the sentry had promised, a man who hated 2 things above all others, and he had both in his hands at once, a paper out of order and a judge who had forgotten he too was under the law. He read every line. He asked me 3 questions and the sentry 1. To the sentry he said only, "You are sure of the voices through the wall?" And the sentry said, "I am sure, my lord, and I will swear it on the bench and hang for the lie if I am wrong." And the old judge looked at him a long moment and said, "No man offers his neck so plainly for a lie." Then he sent his own people, not the justiciars, his own, the assizes riders who answered to no court in Vellenmore, and he stopped the gallows. He stopped it with an hour to spare. They had indeed made haste. The wheelwright Garrick Stennett had already been brought up from the cells into the cold yard, with the rope laid out, and a justiciar's man swearing the entry would be along directly, when the Lord of the Assizes riders came through the gate with the old judge's seal and his single written word, "Stay," and the thing that no one in that yard could lawfully argue with, a court above the court. The trial that the warrant had been built to prevent was held after all, 3 weeks later, before the assize itself. The cart was brought into the yard of the court, and its stained boards shone. The daybook was read aloud, with the factor Orm Caddick's heavy signature 4 times over, asking whether the wheelwright would surely die without a trial. Caddick, taken at his warehouse, did what such men do when the careful paper is stripped away and only the truth is left. He tried to lay it all on the justiciar, and the justiciar tried to lay it all on him, and between the 2 of them, each frantic to hang the other, the whole of it came out plain. Halden Crew had been killed by Caddick, who owed him to the point of ruin. The justiciar had sold the cover-up for a price, and the wheelwright had been chosen for the rope from the first hour, a borrowed cart and an old debt making him the perfect coat to hang a murder on. They did not hang Garrick Stennett. He went home to the yard by the river and his daughter, and the cart he could finally burn. And I learned, weeks after, that the first thing he did with his freedom was to walk to the court at Vellenmore and ask, at the lower desk, for the name of the guard who had stood at the cell door, and that no one could tell him because no one had ever asked it, because the guard at the door is furniture and furniture has no name. He went away without it. He never knew the man who saved him. That, I think, is the truest measure of what the sentry was. He saved a stranger's life and never once wanted the stranger to know it. The justiciar was unmade and bound over to a court no friend of his could close. The factor Caddick answered for the murder he had done. The smooth young clerk in good cloth vanished from the court before the riders came for him, and I never learned where he went, and I have not lost a night's sleep over the gap in my knowledge. Pip stayed at his post in the upper office, dry and shuttered as ever, The law has always more room for the men who choose not to see than for the men who kill, and I have made my peace with that too, though it took longer. As for me, I kept my place. The Lord of the Assize, before he rode on, sent for me, and I expected reward, or perhaps a quiet punishment for the days the warrant lay unentered in my drawer. He gave me neither. He looked at me a long moment over his folded hands and said only, "You left a line blank, Master Wend." The whole of it turned on a blank line. And then, as I rose to go, most men your size run. You hid a thing in a drawer instead, which is a smaller bravery and a rarer one. Go back to your books. So I did. I am a clerk still. I keep the great register at Vellenmore, and my hand has not grown bold, and my heart still knocks at my ribs when a thing comes up the stair that is not what it pretends to be. But I look at the men at the doors now. I had passed them for 11 years and never seen them, and I see them now, the gray and silver, the grounded halberd, the face you are not meant to read, the long unbroken stillness that the whole noisy court walks past as it would walk past a wall. I know now what is inside that stillness. I know that a man can stand at a door for 19 years giving no sign, hearing everything, and that the silence is not emptiness but a kept watch, that the most still man in the room may be the one most certainly keeping faith with something. They had everything to gain by seeing nothing. He had nothing to gain at all. And when the warrant lied, and the whole high machinery of the court lied with it, and even a careful frightened clerk was halfway to handing the truth across in a smooth man's open palm, the one who would not look away, the one who quietly spent his name and his neck on a stranger he never met and never let thank him, was the man we had all agreed to treat as furniture. The seal was perfect, and that was the first thing wrong with it. But it was the still man at the door who was the last thing right.